Welcome back to Connect This. We're going to have a fun show today. I hope. I guess it's up to y'all and our guests, and it's really beyond my control. So I'm just, at this point, it's just like empty wishing. I think that we're going to have a good show. Let's start off with introducing myself. I'm Christopher Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota again after a wonderful worldwide tour. Just really across the United States. But I'm here today with Travis Carter. Welcome, Travis. How you doing?
Good day, Mr. Mitchell. Are you enjoying our unseasonably warm weather here in the upper Midwest?
Well, I was just down in the Tucson area as a guest of the Tano Autumn Nation, and it was like 70 degrees and sunny. Here is like 50 degrees and sunny. And, I would have loved the 70 degrees and sunny to come home to 20 degrees and ice skating, but it's not happening this year.
No, it's beautiful right now.
It's awful.
Welcome home, sir. Welcome home.
Thank you. Kim McKinley with UTOPIA Fiber. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. I am going to make a PSA right now that everybody needs to follow Tribal Broadband Bootcamp on Instagram.
Oh, highly recommended.
Yes. Christopher Mitchell is there's a picture of him trying to pull off his best Burt Reynolds on a whatever Lions rug on here.
That's the best compliment I've ever received. I want to frame that. Will someone I'm going to ask Alexis Shruby to do that, to bead that for me and to jazz it up some. I want to put it on my wall. Yeah.
I don't think I can unsee what I'm seeing right now. So thank you for sharing, Chris.
There is actually a higher quality photo coming of that. So indeed, Instagram, look for Tribal Broadband Bootcamp. And there is another photo. So I was taking photos of other people, and one of my favorite people from the Tribal Broadband Bootcamps, a woman from Tano, she was like, "You should give me the camera and you should pose." And I was like, "All right, good for the goose, good for the gander." So that's what came out of it. Fun times. Doug Dawson from North Carolina with CCG Consulting. How are things in Nashville?
They're always great because this is the city who really likes my 40-year-old t-shirts. Travis is very jealous that I can wear something from 40 years ago. So.
High quality material. You must not have washed it like 100 times each year.
Oh, no. That gets very rare washings. Yes.
Yeah. The dry cleaned t-shirts. I'm sure that you have like a company there that loves your business.
Yeah.
So we do have a request, and also people should throw things in the chat, but Roger has already hit us up on LinkedIn saying that he would like to see a debate over whether within a fiber optic cable, light is traveling as waves or as particles. And I'm just putting a little marker in that. I don't know if anyone has a comment, but we've been working with Mary St. John, who's with Calix University. Calix is a supporter of the Tribal Broadband Bootcamps, and she has a physics PhD, I think. And I love posing those questions. Or somebody see if she wants to come on and talk to us about that. We'll see. Maybe we'll find someone who knows something before we go too deep on that.
Tell Roger to get back to work. I mean, that's what we need to tell Roger.
Roger does bring up an interesting point, though, because the vernacular we use in our industry is maybe a little bit inaccurate. So we'll leave it at that. So
yeah. But thanks for the fancy word vernacular, Travis. I feel like
I got my Chris Mitchell thesaurus word of the day out.
I'm going to keep it simple today, so Travis will win the day.
Yeah.
We also have these. I'm loving these. That's my friend and partner in the Tribal Broadband. We've got our new stickers. Learning shouldn't suck. For the Tribal Broadband Bootcamp. It's a little special party favor for people that are down there. We just did our 11th event, and the training was great. On some future show, maybe we'll talk a little bit about how we do some of the trainings. I would love to get thoughts for people on how to do it. But I'll say this again: the Calix University folks had come up with this idea. We actually have a bunch of signs made up, and then we demonstrate how a user using a fiber optic network, using Wi-Fi on a fiber optic network, every step, like every hop in the path of a data packet, how it works going through. And we have people with the signs and the actual gear of like, they'll have like an ONT, they'll have another person will have a fiber cable, another person will be a splitter, not for Travis's network, of course, but showing how the network works. And that ends up being pretty fun as people kind of act it out a little bit. So we did
I've
that.
always wanted to play an ONT.
Yeah.
So I can't wait till next Halloween. I'm going to be an ONT. What are you going to be, Travis?
Halloween.
Yeah.
I do this goes the same thing every year.
I know what he does. He goes to 6 gigahertz.
Oh yeah, 6G baby. No, I go as a computer nerd, and so far I have been flawless through all the years. So yes.
We are going to be doing some of the broadband training at Net Inclusion, but it is sold out. So I think there's still a possibility to go to Net Inclusion, but our pre-session is sold out. So in Philadelphia in 2 weeks. So if anyone's going to be there, we're going to be hosting a mixer on Wednesday night. Stop by. We'll have a table up on Wednesday in the main area. So stop by if you're at Net Inclusion. Say hi. I'm going to be doing some interviews with folks for the Community Broadband Bits and our Building for Digital Equity podcast. So lots of stuff coming up.
Do you have like chocolates on those tables that at Net Inclusion so it could get people there? Like you should do the chocolate coins, like chocolate buttons. You should do something like that, and that would get more people there.
All right, I'm actually Kim. Will you tell us about the Utopia is Dystopia campaign? And I'm actually going to grab something quick, and then I'll show you when we're done with that segment.
Okay, so we talked. I think it was last place that we are getting attacked here in Utah from the Domestic Policy Caucus, and this is their latest ad that is hitting.
There you go. That shows. Okay.
There you go, and then we have this one. These are hitting across the valley here in Utah, in Utopia cities and non-Utopia cities. I have no idea what they are trying to really accomplish, but they are citing where their sources are. Some of them are from Fierce Telecom. Some of them are from our old financial statements. But they are just trying to paint a picture, but we still have no idea what the motive is. But we are hosting a press conference next Wednesday for the press here, so they can ask us any questions.
Yeah, I mean, New York just kicked off their program. The state is going to be helping to build more municipal networks. California, as you know, has a whole bunch of applications in from cities and counties to build networks. And I think you're the test bed. I think they're trying to figure out what works and doesn't work.
It's really interesting because if you look at this one where they really make fun of surgeons and auto mechanics, you're like, what are you trying to get at? And I've talked to people around, and either they don't associate it with the utopia that we are, or they are just so confused why they're even getting this. It is a mystery to me.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I don't like telling my opponents how to do their job better, but I will say that every time they do these campaigns, anecdotally, it feels to me like we get more support. It feels like it makes more people aware that they don't have to be stuck with a big cable or telephone monopoly that sucks and raises the prices constantly and is just like a pain in the butt, to the point at which you just don't even want to call if something's going wrong. You're just like, I could wait another week. Maybe it'll come back on. I don't know. Like rather than dealing with it, because it's going to be so painful to deal with. And so I don't run in fear from these campaigns. I'm always nervous, but I feel like they often end up helping us more than they hurt us.
I think it's starting a conversation so we can tell our side of the story too, right?
Yeah.
Just like that we have nothing to be ashamed of. And you like my incense in the background. You can see the smoke.
I was wondering about that. I was like, someone's there blowing smoke.
I don't have effects in the background. But yeah, like it's very interesting because I think more people are just more curious about what it is and exploring why this is needed in our country. So I think it's actually doing us a favor in some regard. I mean, I would love for them not to hit, but it never keeps my day a little dull at all. I am always seeing what's happening next.
Yeah.
Well, and then in the non-utopian cities, they're making people look up utopia, which is not a bad thing. They're going to be going, hey, how come we can't get utopia?
It's very interesting. And I think that you're going to see these in some of the new markets, but I think they're trying to make a case for utopia and because all these other cities are doing it, so they're trying to almost stop the other cities from doing it around the country. Like as you said, or Chris, that you've mentioned or going to mention, there's a lot more muni networks that have popped up in the past few years.
Yeah, we just released a report, and there's been a few places that have picked it up. But Rye built a database that tracks all the municipal networks, and got beyond my haphazard collection of spreadsheets and dysfunctional brain to actually have a database. And so, from our numbers, it looks like over the past 2 years, we've seen 42 municipal networks, many of them citywide, being built. And there's a link in the chat. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of growth. There's still more on the way. I don't think any of us really have a full sense of it, but obviously the more people that know about it, the more that will be considering it.
Well, and I think your list is far too small. I think there's a whole lot of iNets around that you haven't picked up. So
yes. Yeah, so yeah, our list mostly focuses on cities that are offering services to residents and businesses. Right. But yeah, I think a lot more cities have been using the rescue plan funds to make sure that their libraries are connected. And I mean, for people that don't know,
and their business districts and their industrial parks. I mean, it's not just the city. So, yeah.
Right, but I mean, it used to be that the cable company, in return for a franchise, would offer free service to the schools and libraries, and then many of them, Comcast in California is one that we watched in Florida, where they were like, "Oh no, we're not going to give this to you for free. We're going to charge you, and we're going to charge you like 5x market rate for it." And so the cities that were smart started building their own networks, and the other cities just grumbled about it and paid the bill. But more and more cities are recognizing that they should have a network that connects themselves because it will just save money. And then even if they don't use it for other things, they're going to be saving money, but they could be using it to bring in more jobs and lower people's bills and things like that. So we have one other thing about municipal networks, but I did want to show. So I'm a puzzle guy. I love jigsaw puzzles. So last year at Net Inclusion, we did a puzzle of a map of different fiber networks, and this year we've got one that is a photo from one of our tribal broadband boot camps. So that's what we'll be doing at Net Inclusion at our table when people aren't there, and also people will come up and help out with us in our experience. They'll just come up and start doing the puzzle. So that's fun.
Do you just send a picture to a puzzle manufacturer and they make a puzzle?
There's a bunch of places, but Portrait Puzzles is amazing. It's a small company in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And so I'm a big, I pay attention to the companies that make the puzzles. Some puzzles look great, but then you put them together and the pieces don't fit right. And it's a pain and it's not fun. Portrait Puzzles, their pieces fit beautifully. It's a great puzzle. Highly recommended. So that's our ad placement one for the day. Portrait Puzzles, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Check it out. So
that's just an extra bonus from Connect This. So.
Right, exactly. you never know from what we're gonna be highlighting. So jigsaw puzzles are amazing, though. It's a really great way. As Travis says, if your internet goes out for 5 seconds, don't use that time to write a nasty review on your phone on a review site. Just do a puzzle.
Chris, you are a fascinating man. I'm going to, I learn more about you all the time. So, but I do like that idea. Kim, what do you think about a night of sending your customers puzzles? I like that idea. Okay.
I think that works in Utah because we have more of a family-oriented culture here. I don't think that works in a New York City if everybody got a puzzle.
Although there's probably more people puzzling in New York City than in Utah.
Probably.
So, I'll say one other thing, which is we'll save for a future show. I've been working on my pool game a lot at some of these events that I've been going to. In the evenings, we go out to a pool hall or a bar. So I'm not gonna be Fats Mitchell anytime soon, but I'm working on it. We're going to be talking about a number of other topics in a minute. We're going to be talking about the map challenges and what we're seeing from where the challenges are happening. You gonna say something first, Doug, before I do the preview?
I'm just kind of stuck on Fats Mitchell. We could keep going.
It's Minnesota Fats was like a huge poker player, right? So yeah, got it. We're going to talk about the role of Comcast and the big companies in ameliorating the digital divide. Damn it! Now I took Travis's word away from him. We're going to be talking about how Travis feels about the ACP. A program that he previously said was one of his favorite government programs of all time, and a few other things. But one other thing we wanted to highlight is, and I think we have a video, or not a video, but a graphic for this. is that Longmont Nextlight just got yet another accolade. Basically, Longmont has long been rated as one of the best fiber optic networks in the nation. They're not a normal. I don't want people to think that, oh, I'll build a municipal network and I'm going to have the same success that they have in Longmont. They were exceptionally good, and they're competing against Comcast and CenturyLink with some Lumen Fiber in there. But Longmont took like more than half of the market in 4 or 5 years. I think they're like approaching 60% of the market. They have a great rate. Most people are paying $50 a month for a gigabit, and the people just raved about the network. And so PC Magazine went out of their way to just say that they were including Nextlight as a best tech brand, even though it's only available in one, mid-sized city, because of the amount of support that they see coming out for it. So congratulations to Nextlight for setting a high bar of customer service and that kind of support.
They have also gone way out of their way to do extra stuff. They have tremendous amounts of free outdoor Wi-Fi and just all sorts. I mean, they've gone way past the normal things you would do. So.
On a previous show, we talked about how they were doing private LTE, and we had a guest on to talk about that. And so, yes, I think that they are very, they're really, they use their position to think about how they can benefit the community in ways that are more aggressive than many other people. And, funny story, 2 of the top people that run it are former higher ups at CenturyLink. And so, it gives you a sense that it's really about the incentives of the ownership approach as opposed to the people, right? Well, there are good people that work for those big companies, but they don't have the freedom to do innovative things in the way that you do in a municipality. Kim?
But Longmont was started during the legislation where they had to go to the ballots, right?
Yeah, Longmont is the only one that ever lost at the ballot.
Oh, really?
So in 2009, they went to the voters to say, we want to build a municipal network, and Comcast scared everyone, and they dropped $250,000, which was a record at the time for a local ballot initiative, to oppose it, and they scared people. In 2011, then people after people voted no, like a 2 to 3 margin, people were like, wait, why did I vote no on that thing? Why was I scared by this dumb campaign? So they ran it again in 2011. And in 2011, Comcast dropped $500,000. Well, it's a combination of the cable companies and whatnot. But they dropped another record of $500,000. And at that time, people voted yes 2 out of 3 to say, yes, we want this utility to be built. So, Travis?
So I'm just curious, how do they calculate this?
How do they calculate what?
Kim, do you know? Because I look at the Google star rating, and Kim's higher rated than they are.
Yeah, so they used a net promoter, and they said something about 2 net promoter scores. So I don't know how that exactly works. They have 299 net promoter scores for Nextlight broadband.
That's unheard of. That's just, good for them. I was gonna say maybe they had something to prove, right? So when they went to the ballot and the initiative, and they just had it kind of like a chip on your shoulder, if you will, so that they were trying to prove something that they are best, and they have. I don't know how it's calculated, Travis, and I think in marketing everything can be skewed towards your favor or against you, depending. But I think that they've gotten a lot of accolades, and we should all give kudos to them.
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, and I think, Travis, you're right. Anytime we're talking about these measurements, we should bear in mind that measurements are imperfect, and the people who are doing the measuring often aren't the best experts. But nonetheless, it's something that we can seize upon to advance, some of the things we want to see in the world. That's what we do. I don't think it's too cynical, but there is a bias in all of the measurements.
I was just curious how they promoted it. So
yeah. Let's roll into map challenges. So, Doug, it's been too long since we reminded everyone that the maps suck and aren't accurate and are incredibly difficult to fix, and that, frankly, people who get paid to be specialists in this by the government should have gotten this better rather than asking us all to do it. But nonetheless, the states are required by the federal government to try to fix the maps that the FCC has spent a ton on and not provided anything of use. How is that going as the states are starting to do their map challenges?
Well, there's only been some very early challenges. A few of the states have started. Most of them will be starting in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months. They have to get their Volume 1 BEAD rules approved by the NTIA first. So a lot of them have already missed that starting date. It's not going well at all for the few who have started. Nobody's making the challenges. And that's because the challenges at this point can only be made by ISPs or local governments
Or
The
me.
ISPs are not the bead challenges. You can't make a bead challenge.
I thought nonprofits could do it.
Well, maybe a nonprofit, but
Right. So I could under
people can't.
as the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we could
Yes.
organize it, but Chris Mitchell cannot.
But Chris Mitchell cannot. The problem is 95% of counties around the country who have no idea how to make this challenge. And so, I just looked at a county last week who is going to make a challenge, and we found 3 big giant problems, which altogether will, if they win the challenges, will increase their bead passings from 2,000 to 6,000. 4,000 places are misclassified. And so, and what that accounts to, there's a bunch of people who I would even name them. Windstream has claimed 1, 2, and 300 megabit DSL. What do you think about that, Travis? in rural areas, there's an ISP, a WISP, who has claimed past 1, 2, 3, and 400 speeds in areas where there are no speed tests for the last year up through December. So they're just promoting the capability, but they must not have any customers, because you can't have customers and get no speed tests for a year. And so you go ahead.
Oh, I'm dropping in the chat a link to a podcast that I did. It's episode 574 with Tom Reed about the algorithm that they used in Ohio to try to identify places where one would be the most useful to do speed test challenges, and trying to identify where provider claims were most unreasonable. And it seemed like it was a really good approach, although I think NTIA and others aren't interested in approaches that can't.
They're not interested in challenges, correct? And there's no such thing as 100% accuracy.
Right.
You can't do it. So that's my second half. You took my thunder away. But in this county also, there were large circles claimed by T-Mobile. They do have fast speeds for a mile or two, but not for 3 and 4 and 5 miles. And so altogether, there's probably 4,000 locations that should be BEAD eligible. And I think we're going to find, after the BEAD grants are starting to be awarded, that there's 2, 3, 4 million locations that are just not going to be covered. And those people are going to look up and go, how come I didn't get grant money? And they're going to come back and what are they going to say? Oh, you have 300 megabit DSL. You don't need it. Right?
Yeah, I think it's a deeply flawed process, because this is something that should be handled.
The counties don't even know how to do this.
Exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous to push it down this far. I mean, This is something that should have been handled by requiring that people submit, the people that have the data submit accurate information under penalty of some kind of either fine or other sanction if they provide misleading data to the FCC. But the Federal Communications Commission does not want to punish even repeat offenders. And
it's even worse than that.
Kim was going to jump in, and I'm really curious. I think Kim's getting hotboxed right now. So
I am getting everything I turn this thing towards, it still keeps smoking in this direction. But what I was going to say is, can even Doug, a city or a county, do this without a consultant? Can they even navigate it? So they have to hire someone to even endeavor down this process. And how many people out there that are not you that can actually work through all the crap?
And it's now too late. If you haven't done it, it's too late to start. So, but the problems you get into here are, nobody knows how to do it. You can't do it perfectly. Even if you know the right answer, you can't satisfy the NTIA rules to get it done. It's just never going to happen. It's just very unsatisfactory process. Remember that on the wireless stuff, the very first rules said wireless ISPs had to give you a heat map of where they can see from their towers, and they have to get a professional engineer to sign off that those are accurate. And then
you know what? If it's a perfect circle, we know you're lying.
Well, and then they excuse those 2 rules. They don't have to do those 2 things. They're not in place. And so that was how those were supposed to work. And that actually, the heat maps are only half accurate, because what they don't show you is, the WISP don't want to mention this, but it slows down when you hit the woods. I mean, you can do pretty good broadband through the woods, but you can't do it as fast as if there's not woods. And so the heat map won't pick up that. But without those 2 requirements, they can report anything they want, and they do. They're reporting gigantic, 11, 20 mile long coverages from an antenna. I don't think you can do that.
Well, and that's where it just drives me a little crazy because I'm pretty critical of what they've done. And then I sometimes hear from friends of mine, inside the Beltway who are like, well, have you brought these, questions to the FCC and let them know? And I'm like, do they really need me to spend my time and their time telling them that they shouldn't let companies lie to them about where they're offering service?
And the answer is all of these things have been brought to them many times. They know about it. Yes. These are not news. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you're right, Doug, in that, the BEAD funds are still largely going to go to areas that need it, but not all of the areas that need it. And I'm curious to see what happens to some of these places that are left behind. In some of the places, we'll see simple line extensions. In other places, I'm not sure who's going to pick up the bill to make the connections that will be needed.
The problem's the messaging. They're saying we're going to solve every unserved location.
Yeah.
They're not.
It's the worst.
That's the problem.
I would love to figure out the individual within the Biden administration that keeps pushing this idea that it's a good idea to use this internet for all language. When I talk to people in urban areas and I'm like, it's not coming for you. And I talk to people in rural areas and I'm like, maybe it's coming to you if like you get lucky in terms of the sweepstakes of the maps. But a lot of people are going to be upset. And it is going to bring a lot of good broadband. So people get it. Good for them. I mean, good for them. But some of them are going to get a crappy ISP who, even after they get the money, will do a bad job. So they're and charge a lot for it. Kim?
I just needed to ask Travis a question. Do you remember how much these maps cost?
All I remember is it wasn't enough. I mean, we put like 3 nickels into a $10 problem. So, if we would have spent 10 billion, they would have probably done a better job. So
I'm not convinced of that. I think actually we put 10 billion into a problem that probably could have been solved otherwise with the right rules. I mean, that's the thing is that so Chris and Travis cannot, working together, tell the big companies and the small companies, you have to give us accurate information under penalty of law if you're lying to us. Only the government can require to collecting accurate information, right? I mean, like we see this within the Securities and Exchange Commission. There is a reason that when it comes down to important information, the government uses its unique power to punish people for lying to it. And then when it chooses not to do that, we get these sorts of results. And it is, I don't understand.
All they had to say was, if you over-report an area with something that doesn't exist, if those people don't have broadband at the end of the day, you have to fund it.
Yeah, I mean that would be an option. Also, it would be like, if you over-report by 20%, it's egregious amount, or you get a couple warnings and then we nail you, right? I mean, like it doesn't have to be the sort of thing where if you're a small business and you make a mistake, you get sanctioned massively. That would be terrible. But you can have
here's the better news. Better news, there's 2 lawsuits at the Supreme Court that may get rid of the FCC's ability to do fines.
There are?
Yes.
There are.
It could actually remove the entire USF mechanism in the way that it's done. And so, I mean, I think we're all viewing these as unlikely, but tremendously impactful. Because, I mean, for example, if the Supreme Court rules one way, you've got a bunch of rural ISPs that have borrowed a ton of money to build and operate networks on the basis of getting a check every month from the federal government to pay for it. And the Supreme Court could say, nope, the FCC cannot do that. And so at that point, I assume the federal government is in breach of contract. I don't know how. I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't know how all this works, but I know that it's scary and ugly.
The RDOF guys are going to stop building about 3 minutes later. Yes. So, and the AC, all those guys.
So Doug, is anyone going after this BEAD dollar? I thought this was all dead.
They're going. They're going after it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure multiple people are going after it. You bet. So,
well, simultaneously, Doug, I think you've said, and I agree, that we think that some areas will not have people going after it, but most of the money will have somebody seeking it. And I'll just say
there's some places that are so hard to build, no ISP in their right mind is going to take the money. So, yeah. And
at that point, a state may have to cajole and say, what will it take to do it, and try to figure that out. But also, I'll just note that, y'all snickering at Ezra. That's a pretty good comment. The other thing is that I will just note that, like, at one time we thought it was credible that Texas and others may not take the BEAD money, and that looks kind of foolish in retrospect. Of course they all took it, but it is hard to forecast some things that look obvious in retrospect. So I think it's worth revisiting, those expectations and whatnot. But anyway, the challenges.
I think there's also a chance that a few states like Texas take the money and immediately throw the NTIA rules away and do it their own way and say, what are you going to do about it? That's what I expect.
Well, and that's an option. I was talking to some people over the past couple of weeks about this to get a sense of what they think, people that have more day-to-day work on this area, and they think that some of the rules will start to get thrown away where states cannot meet them because they've not had the pipeline put together, right? There's some things that states have to do that they can't just do at the last second. They need to have a process months in advance working toward it, and if they're coming up to a deadline and they suddenly realize, because they have very limited staff capacity, we cannot achieve this thing, then that's how the rules may first start getting thrown under the bus. Kim, you look like you had a reaction to something.
I was just still thinking, like, you don't have trust in the government. I'm with Ezra on this. Like, the government does everything right. As a government employee myself.
The hair on my back always raises up on those sorts of comments. I mean, this is where Travis and I start to get a little bit tense at times in our text. Like, I just feel like the government does a ton of good stuff that work, and like we ignore that and we take that for granted. And then there's other things that it does poorly, and often it is doing those things because no one else is likely to do them. Like, it's like it's a hard job that someone has to do, and so yeah, like it gets things wrong.
I have a more important observation. This is the only thing I've been on where, as the show goes, some people have more clothing on. What's next?
Yeah.
Well, we like to keep it spicy here on Connect This.
All right, so Kim, you opened this topic up because I didn't want to bring it up, but it was just, I can't think of anything worse than calling the government because my internet's not working.
Well, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand what you mean.
Well,
first of all,
so networks. Oh my God! I mean, I can't even get a driver's license, and now I got my internet's down.
So let's be clear about this, right? Like, so I hate the term government for the way you just used it, Travis, because I think most people differentiate between the federal government and local government. And most people call local government even when things that have nothing to do with local government aren't working. And so people have that issue, but we have 2,000 municipally operated power systems in the country. And we can do studies to find out, how do people feel about their municipal electricity versus the investor-owned electricity. And they like paying less. They like the fact that when they do have something going wrong, they call the government and it gets fixed quickly, more quickly than if I call Excel Energy. I think I've said before about, like, I learned about volts because
You made that up.
What?
That you get it resolved more quickly.
No,
you can study this. I live in a city where when we called the water company, they were here within 20 minutes. I mean, it's impressive how quickly they responded to our.
No, and so I had a branch, like on a beautiful August day, one of my ash trees dropped a branch on our power line and brought it down to the ground, and it was still energized. And I called Excel Energy, and they were still not there in 8 hours later. I had an electrician that I finally got a hold of on a Sunday afternoon who came out waiting for them to de-energize the line to fix it. And he actually did it. He started trimming away at the branch, got it off. And he was like, you know what, this thing, like, we could just pull it back up, put it under tension and call it a day to be able to get through the night. And like, at the same time, like, I'll just point to that's an anecdote, but like, when you look at after Sandy came through the Northeast, I think it was Reuters, but some massive press agency they did a study of the cities that owned their own electric utilities in Massachusetts and those areas that got hit. It wasn't Sandy; it was like the blizzard that came right after it. They had an Alberta Clipper or something. They had whatever, I don't know. I'm not a weather guy. They had something that came through, and anyway, the National Grid had bought all these municipal electric companies over the past several decades. The companies that were still owned by the cities had almost all of their power restored within 24 hours. National Grid took up to a week in many areas. And then they looked at why, and National Grid had systematically cut their maintenance budget. And so the lines that are owned by the private investor-owned utility had overgrown the distribution network. And so when the storm came through, they had so much more damage because they had taken the money that was supposed to be used for maintenance and they'd put it into their shareholders' pockets. Thank you for my 401k. And they had put it into the distribution network. And so when the storm came through, they had so much more damage because they had taken the money that was supposed to be used for maintenance and they'd put it into their shareholders' pockets. Thank you for my 401k. and the executive pay, whereas the municipalities kept the maintenance bus schedules, and so they had many fewer problems. We see this, like, I mean, if you want to look at like the American Public Power Association, there's numerous studies, and they're done by, whether they're done by an interested party or by others, there's a whole bunch of studies that look at whether or not public power does well compared to investor-owned utilities. And the investor-owned utilities do worse. And it's obvious. Like, they're taking like 3 cents out of every 10 cents, or 30 cents on the dollar, and they're not using it for the system, whereas the municipality does.
I still think you're convincing Travis.
That was pretty close to a rant, Travis.
I was trying, you know, it's my number one thing on my Get Chris to Rant document that I have is
I'm such a sucker.
Is talk about how government can't do anything right, because he bites on it every time, you know. I mean, and number 2 on my list was this during the Woodrow Wilson era that you were quoting all these facts, or are these modern?
Worst Democrat ever. So Travis, how do you feel about the ACP? Let's dive into that.
You know, honestly, it's, you know, I thought it was a great program. I guess I see the flaw in it. I thought was they gave most of it to the cell phone providers, and the ISPs didn't get a big chunk of it.
Yeah, more than half.
And it's really disappointing that it's not a priority in Washington to refund it, as far as I can tell. So, you know, I think it's just going to come to an end, and that's kind of the end of it. But I thought the structure of it was pretty good. I mean, the implementation in the beginning was a little rough, but
okay. So Travis, let me poke you on this, right?
Yep.
We have a program here that you know, we've spent what, $12 billion. I think we have another $2 billion to get through, and we're expecting to get through that pretty quick, in part through just the backlog of companies that haven't yet reported their past numbers. And so the FCC forecasts that we'll run out of money in April, even though I think there's still like $2 billion left in the fund. Most of the money, we're talking about more than $10 billion, went to shady wireless I shouldn't say shady. They went to wireless companies that specialized in signing people up in parking lots under somewhat dubious circumstances for a service that probably doesn't really meet their local needs.
They were wireless companies who didn't actually own the wireless network. That was their first problem. So.
Okay, so right, they're resellers, and they specialize, and most of them had specialized in the Lifeline program previously, of getting cheap phones into people's hands who are eligible, and then giving them this benefit. But it's, you know, I would say is not maximizing the intent of the program to really deliver the value to those homes. Of the money that went to the wired providers, you know, a significant chunk of it, like, I don't know, 30 or 40% of it went to Charter. A lot of it went to Comcast, companies who could have been offering that deal, you know, without any meaningful hit.
They already were.
The bottom line, right? That's what, yeah.
No, it was worse than that. They had a $10 plan, and as soon as ACP came along, they raised it to $30.
Right.
So they could give it away for free and collect 30.
Now for Charter, I mean, so there's a little bit of a conflict, right? Because Comcast did a great job with Internet Essentials, as good of a job as can be expected. And this leads into the topic I want to go to next. So I'm not going to get there yet. We'll come back to this. But Comcast is doing a decent job. Charter's problem was terrible. Charter went crazy on this, trying to sign everyone up. I think analysts think Charter's getting on the order of like $700 million a year from the ACP program. You know, Travis, is it appropriate to be giving this much money to these companies when they're doing the bare minimum? And frankly, like, given the fact that they already built their networks out and amortized the cost of the networks under a regulated monopoly environment, is it appropriate now to be giving them taxpayer dollars to be serving people?
But they here's the issue. They're the ones that have the network into where most of these people live. Who else are you going to give it to? I mean, we give all the BEAD money to all the rural areas. Remember, we keep going back to this. 82% of Americans live in cities that are only predominantly covered by the cable companies. Who else are you going to give it to?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
During the franchise agreements, they had to build out all the areas. So areas that other providers won't build out, they're in. So
that's the conflict. Exactly. If you want to make a difference today, you got to go to the people that have networks in front of homes.
Exactly. It doesn't give you any good to give it to people that aren't there. So I don't know.
I'm personally glad to see them have grabbed it. It's just that they already had those programs in place and they just moved them over to it.
So I was running some numbers for Baltimore and Cleveland based on the ACP. And so here's what I would say. in terms of the counter argument. And I think these are like, this is, I want to raise this up, not because I think I'm going to end this with, and it is obvious that you should take my position. I think this is a hard argument, but Cleveland is getting something like in the order of $30 million per year in ACP benefits. And that's mostly going to charter and wireless companies. If you took $30 million a year and you fed it into the Digital C, and you had other cities that had a similar nonprofit network that was focused on serving people, you could make a huge permanent dent in this, in that, you know, over a period of like 4 or 5 years, you could build out a network that would then require just a few $1 million at most to continue operating. And you would end up over 10 years spending far less and delivering a far better solution. Travis?
Chris, you're missing the obvious solution to the problem. We stop calling these internet networks and we call them light rail. Because whenever there's a light rail network, you can get $2.9 billion to build a rail line to know where you need to go. And if you just need 100 million more, they seem to be able to find it.
No, so Travis,
they can't find 3 cents to help out.
This is where Travis and I are ripping our hairs out. In Minnesota, we have made a spectacularly bad investment. We're approaching $3 billion on a light rail network to a couple of suburbs that will generate some benefit, maybe, but relative to the cost, absolutely not. If you put $1 billion into broadband in the metro area intelligently, you would have an economic impact that is like 20 or 30 times what we were getting out of this stupid train. And it's infuriating.
Because it's not a priority to anyone down at City Hall. Broadband is not a priority. Yeah, I don't know if it is in other areas. I
want to wake Kim up in a second, but I do want to address Takey McTaker here. Everyone in LA hates LADWP. So it's funny. And then everyone outside that has the monopolist is begging the Department of Water and Power to come to them. Within the municipal electricity cities, like Chattanooga is one of the best operated. Seattle City Light is considered pretty good, but some of the ones that are in the biggest cities, like and I'll say San Antonio also has a good reputation. But if you look at like New York, like there's so much politics between the local and the state. And there's like, I don't know if there's a history of corruption. So public ownership is not perfect. And as it gets really big, it can get ugly. But in general, I would take it over the private ownership. So I just wanted to note that I'm not saying that everything's great publicly owned. You really need people to take accountability for it. Kim?
No, I think that's fair. I think the problem with a lot of these publicly owned is that you have to get people who have experience in the field. And I think that's the biggest struggle of getting people at a public salary to do what they could do for a lesser salary in the private world. And that's really hard. And especially in broadband right now over anything. I just heard a salary that somebody was offered and I was like, holy crap, what is happening in this industry right now? But people are just willing to pay outrageous salaries to get anyone with some experience in the door.
Yep. Now, Travis, you have been approached by an unnamed entity, maybe more than one, to say, what are you doing about ACP? So, Travis, how do you react when somebody says the federal government failing to continue offering ACP is your problem?
Well, that's just the general perception is, well, now that the fund's up, what are you going to do? And my general thought is, well, what are you going to do? That's always the problem here, especially when we interact with a lot of these entities. They want to talk about the problem, but very few people actually want to address it.
But I have a question for you, Travis, because somebody asked me this morning and I didn't know how to answer it. It's like you're in this pickle, right? Because it could get refunded, like probably not. Or it might not. Like, what do you plan for? Or if it does like run out of money and then they refund it in like July, like what is your plan? Do you have a plan for all of those scenarios or are you just sitting back and watching it?
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to honor the base price they're paying through the end of the year and let all this politics and everything kind of work its way out. If ACP has not been refunded by the end of the year, then I guess my assumption is it never will be. But if we have to eat 6 months while they figure it out, so be it. It's not the end of the world.
And how many people
that puts you at the top tier? Most ISPs are just not going to do that at all.
Yeah, so I figured we'd run it through 2023 here or whatever year we're in.
But Travis, you don't have that many subs, right? I mean,
no, less than like 1,000.
So we're just working with with tribes and had multiple different tribes in the room at our tribal broadband boot camp, and we're asking the question of how bad is the down the ACP ending is that going to be, because $75 a month for those who are on tribal or on reservations specifically, although I'll say USAC doesn't do a great job of always knowing where that is, but a number of there's one of Mohawk networks, I think 10% of their subscribers, I mean it's a significant chunk, are doing that. I was on a panel with CTC, which is a wonderful co-op in the center of Minnesota, and they're working with the tribe to expand there. And many people that they talk to living, on reservation were saying we don't have the money to pay for it. We can't do it. Other people that we talked to said we have so few ACP customers that we actually don't anticipate it being an issue because they just couldn't get through the application process. And so the funny thing is that the utter failure of the government, of the federal government, to make this a reasonable ask for people to sign up is a saving grace in some areas, because they haven't become too dependent on it, because people just couldn't navigate the process to take part in it, even though they were clearly eligible.
I have a question for you. Do you think that municipal networks or smaller networks who can't float some of this money or do what Travis is doing, do you think that they're going to some of these people are going to switch back to the Comcast because of their Internet Essentials programs and some of these other providers who have a low cost program? So are you going to see almost a shift of subscribers going back to big telco because of those programs?
That's my theory. I mean, I'm no financial wizard, but $1 is better than $0. They're already hooked up. So we're going to put a couple caveats in there. If we have a hard time collecting from you, you lose the benefit. If it's an easy relationship, then you can keep the benefit till the end of the year. But if we have to chase you around for the $20, then I'm just going to convert them to a normal customer, and they'll probably go back to Comcast.
There's some good questions here. So Mike asks, why didn't they get it? My understanding is Comcast and I don't know specifically about AT&T, but Charter, I think they worked very hard. Their lobbyists pushed hard to get it reauthorized, and they just were not able to. The question that I'll come back to the second comment in a second. The question that was being asked constantly is what's the pay for? We're talking about a program that's going to cost $6 to $7 billion a year. Believe it or not, that's a significant amount of money. I mean, last time I checked, NASA's budget was $20 billion a year. It's in that range. Maybe it's a little bit more when I wasn't looking, but that's a $6 to $7 billion expenditure. Is a significant expenditure. And so Republicans didn't see the value in it, even though most of them, half of the money goes to their districts and to rural areas where it's really needed. The second part of the question is that I do think Mike's right in that is that there's always been games about whether or not ACP or other programs could be used to incent competition, and it's been a big effort to among the big cable and telephone companies to make sure that government money will not create competition, even accidentally. One other question. Let me go to Doug with it. Sorry, are you going to respond, Travis?
No, I was just curious. What one comment I'd like to go is we didn't put a lot of effort into ACP, though. I know a lot of people did a lot of marketing and promotion and they built a business around it. The people that came to us actually were people that needed help. And so we onboarded them. We didn't go out and just harvest people like I think a lot of other folks did. So.
Well, it's hard. I mean, honestly, if you look at when the FCC finally put money into outreach, thank you, Ryan. But NASA's budget was almost $24 billion in 2023. If you look at the amount of money that is given to groups, and then you look at the number of people they were expected to sign up for the ACP, there's a major cost. Actually, I think the cost of signing up a user, of having someone walk them through it, is greater than that user would get back from the program for multiple years. If you actually run the numbers, I think.
I have a question.
Really stunning.
What the heck is NASA doing for $23 billion anymore? What are we doing?
Wait a minute. This This call's going downhill fast.
Oh yeah. Okay, because there was going to be my government versus private argument. SpaceX is launching daily, and NASA's sitting around doing nothing. So.
All right. I'm not going to get into this, but y'all need to look at like the whole like launching a freaking satellite, not a satellite, but like a probe that like circles around like the cosmos for like several years, hits a freaking comet or like asteroid or something, gets the debris, brings it back to a splashdown in a safe part of the US so we can like get it, and just goes out again. The probes that we're putting into like finding whether or not there's life on Saturn or the moons of Saturn or Jupiter, like I mean, like it's a good investment. I think it is important. So I'm not going to go any deeper on that. I feel a bit passionately about that.
I think it's probably Ruben, but his comment is just amazing.
So yeah. All right. We have another good comment here. That's a good comment, but this is what I was thinking of. So markup on services like cable are. So if Comcast is getting $15 a month for a low income user, my position is that yes, Comcast is making the tiniest bit of margin on that user. I don't think Travis is. I think Travis is losing money. Even at $30 a month, Travis is probably losing money because Comcast amortized the big costs of their network long ago, and newer operators are still trying to pay off the network build costs. And so that's the difference. Doug?
And I would disagree.
That is the difference. But yes. No, I'd like to hear why he disagrees.
So Doug and I agree. Travis is going to tell us why we're wrong.
Because the big cost isn't necessarily the network, it's the ongoing support.
Right. How much do you think Comcast pays to support these people?
I think you'd be very surprised how much.
I think when you have 30 million subscribers and then you have your call centers located in the lowest cost areas, I think that Comcast has a very low cost of their CSRs in their budget.
Okay, well,
yeah, but I mean, let's go back into this. As ACP, you're talking about people with digital literacy problems as well. Mm-hmm. So then they would probably have more customer.
But that's where Comcast strategy is brilliant, because everyone knows if you call Comcast, you've got to spend hours on the phone to try to get help, and that's part of Comcast's strategy. So, person on ACP, I think that if you have an ACP user on USI Fiber, I think they might call Travis because they know they're going to get help. But if you're on the Comcast network, you're going to call a local nonprofit or the library or some other group. You're not going to call Comcast for help.
Valid point. If you're too available, you get a lot of calls.
I call Travis for everything.
Someday I'll tell you about we had a blip in our network at 3:30 in the morning, and someday I'll tell you about how you would have thought I killed every puppy in town. I mean, it was amazing, the outlet, but a lot of it is because we're just available to complain to. Comcast's out an hour a month here. I don't call anyone. I go outside, but I'm just used to it because who's going to care? Who's going to answer the phone? So you are right.
And I will say Comcast actually, I don't know if they doubled it, but they significantly increased their customer service budget over the past 10 or 15 years. Brian Roberts came in, and that was a big thing that he did, but it's still, I think, a fraction of what you pay, Travis, or what Kim pays.
Yeah.
Then finally, the last question in this was how much infrastructure could be built at $6 billion a year? And I don't know how to answer that entirely. I'll give people a sense like there's a massive need across the United States.
That would take 100 years to solve the rural digital divide. Yeah, so it's nice, but that's not going to fix it.
Well, but who's spending the $6 billion? I guarantee you, Kim and I deploy a network for $6 billion, we get exponentially more outcome than if BEAD deploys $6 billion.
Why aren't you going after the BEAD grants?
Really? Yeah. Give us absolutely the hardest areas in the country to service, and then tax us on the money and matching funds and prevailing wage and who's going to do it?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll just say, and unfortunately, the kind of people who tune in to listen to this aren't the problem. But there's a whole bunch of people out there who know who they're going to vote for, no matter how well that person represents their interest in DC. And
I don't know. I've always thought Takey McTakey was the problem.
Yeah. Oh, look at this. I like this. We need more micro tick hardware. You know what?
Whoever that is, yes.
A little secret. I have a no micro tick hardware rule at work. And that's controversial in our space. Yep.
So I did want to note some of this. Like, I mean, behind the scenes and some of the different cities, we are seeing Comcast and Charter getting more aggressive, whether that is trying to conflict out all of the lobbyists in the area by basically being like, hey, we saw that you wanted to lobby for someone against us. How about if we just give you a pile of money to not do that and be on retainer? That is happening. This is something that Comcast did with the NBC merger. I think it was one of that Comcast mergers where they retained every law firm worth anything in DC to make sure that their opponents could not hire anyone that was that had the relationships that would be affected to try to block them. And Comcast is, among others, is playing hardball with groups that are working with groups. So like if you have a group that's trying to really change the system to bring competition, but more importantly, investment into low income areas where cable isn't doing a good job, I think Comcast is starting to threaten groups that have good relationships with those groups to say, if you want to get your philanthropy money from us, you can't be seen palling around with a group that's trying to bring new investment into low income areas. And so I'm annoyed at that. But it is what they're doing. And I often say that we don't ask McDonald's why there's hunger in America. And so I don't think we should ask Comcast to fix all the problems of people not being able to use high quality internet in urban areas. At the same time, McDonald's doesn't lobby against food banks, so it's a bit infuriating. So I don't know if the rest of you have thoughts about the role that a company like Comcast can play of getting us where we want to go when in urban areas.
Oh, I think they're all those big companies, the lobbying they do against competition is beyond immoral. I mean, the fact is they're getting more shrill because they're now losing customers. Comcast isn't growing anymore. They're shrinking. You're going to see a very different cable company over the next 5 years. I mean, they are really getting ups. I mean, they've already had a lot of high, quiet turnover in the upper echelons. They don't know what to do about the fact that they're a shrinking company now. So it's going to get very interesting.
I just saw a headline. I think a Comcast exec sold a significant chunk of stock just in the last day or two. Yeah. Anyway, Travis, what are your thoughts about this?
Oh crap! I wasn't listening.
Okay, I'll go. Travis, I'll just go. Like, okay,
I was reading the comments while you guys were talking. Sorry.
I understand what you're saying, and I get that they shouldn't be doing it. But as a private entity, to protect their market share, I understand why they are doing it from a business aspect. And I think that's where we get very we have a lot of fights in this industry because it's what is the right thing to do. But if you have like shareholders at the end of like who want their returns, they're going to do something else. And I think that it can't be mistaken that there's two sides to this coin. But I totally get it. Comcast shouldn't be responsible for having to provide connectivity.
Oh, okay.
But they shouldn't complain about like these areas not getting covered if they're not willing to do it either.
I mean, here's the reality, and nobody likes to hear this, but the city of Minneapolis has a $1.7 billion budget. If broadband was a serious issue for them, they could peel off a few dollars every year and resolve it. They're just not going to. They're just not going to do it. So is it our responsibility to solve this issue? We're happy to help, but in 10 years of Chris and I trying to come up with a program of happy to help, we're the only one with our hand up saying, well, we'll help. Everybody else stares at us and goes, okay, well, what are you going to do? It's like, no, it takes more than one.
Yeah, there was an exchange that Travis and I had, which was something along the lines of, I think, Travis, you said that someone was looking for you to help them. Or I said they were looking for you to help them, and you said that they were looking to help you, maybe. And I said, well, maybe the word "help" isn't even the right word. Because, like, they just want to encourage you to do it.
Well, and so my new tactic has been this. Okay, it's going to be $100 to do this project. I'll pay half, you pay half. I have my half, and I'm ready to start tomorrow. You let me know when you're ready to start. Years go by, and I hear nothing.
Right.
You know,
And then we're not talking about, this is not like where you're trying to get into the high income areas. You're talking about the areas where there are increased costs to build, there are increased costs to operate, and you're likely to have fewer subscribers. These are areas that need service. And there's a lot of people there who are willing to pay for it. But the simple fact is it is more expensive to build, in part because of security, and it is more difficult to collect bills because people have less income and are more likely to go months without being able to pay.
You are correct. But again, until somebody takes it seriously, and then knowing my luck, they'll be in the role for 4 years and then they're gone, and then seriously walked out the door, and now I'm dealing with not serious again. So
it's politics at its finest. And that's the struggle with networks like this. If people want to like grandstand on their political beliefs, and then you get somebody else on the other side, it flip-flops. I don't like Doug. It's interesting. You handle with communities all over the country. Do you see this all the time, like the flip flopping?
I've seen. Remember, there's 4 or 5 municipal networks now where the current city people in charge want to sell it off and get rid of it.
Yeah.
Even though they're now profitable, and once they're profitable, they're returning cash to the city, and all the citizens are happy. But they're running on, we should sell this thing because we could get a one-time big check.
Yeah,
and maybe they're not wrong. But that's not what the citizens want. Every time there's a change in administration, your company is at risk if you're a municipal business.
I don't want to pick on the city, so I'm not going to name them, but there's 2 places where they sold, both for fairly legitimate reasons. It wasn't just a matter of like someone that I would say, like, there's some people who just want to get that big check, spend it, and then try to become the governor, before anyone realizes that it was a scam that was not in the long-term interest of the city. There are valid reasons to privatize a network at times. And but one of the things that we've seen when you check back in 4 years later is that the investment in upgrades hasn't been continued at the same level, that they are starting to scrimp in some ways where they have increased outages and the service is not as good as it used to be. The bills have gone up and things like that. And so there's a real trade-off that comes with not operating it. Now, if you want to keep operating it, I'll just come back to something Kim said. You got to make sure you have the right people. You have someone that's a superstar operating a network, they're going to get offers to operate bigger networks elsewhere. Who are you going to replace that person with? Someone that still knows what they're doing? That's the challenge sometimes.
But Chris, you taught me something I think is invaluable. Didn't you say the number one highest compensated public employee in a state is the head football coach of the
basketball
or the basketball of a college?
Every state. Yeah.
There's your priority. That's the number one. Where let's say that you're Kim in charge of the broadband for a city, and what would that person make? $100,000 a year, maybe?
I mean,
they're going to get poached away in a nanosecond.
Especially if they're good at football.
Yeah. So Kim, you got to learn how to bounce a ball to make good money in public. I guess as a public official.
You imagine me coaching a football team? It would be the most hilarious thing on the planet. But I think that's some of the struggles, and that's where my fear of some of these muni broadbands is going to be. Is because you might have well-intended folks who get it off the ground, make it successful, and then they leave. And then you get somebody who's willing to take some of these lower salaries at this point and come in. So I think it's going to be interesting. It is definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I have a question for you, Chris. What are some of the reasons why you think a network should be privatized?
One is unfavorable legal environment. So you have a network, for instance, I'll use Chattanooga as an example, in part because it would be insane to privatize that. But in a situation where you have a network and regionally you want to extend it, but the state does not allow you to cross political lines, and you want to bring the benefit of the network to a wider population, going private allows you to do that. In Pennsylvania, which has a law against a municipal ownership that is not as bad as in Chattanooga in Tennessee, there's been some efforts, I think, in the western part of the state where they were looking at a municipal investment, and they decided to try and go with a nonprofit to avoid the fact that in Pennsylvania, you have to ask the incumbent telephone company for permission to build a network if they are already offering a service that is similar. And in taking into consideration whether or not they're offering the service, you cannot consider price or any other factor, basically. And so, under that, it's like, well, sure, for $2 million a year, we'll offer this service. All right, well, then you got to get their permission to build a fiber network there. And so if there are state laws that restrict it, that's one. Another is, if you have a history of incompetent and corrupt management, I think it would be better to fix that, but I'm not just going to say it's easy to fix that stuff. Sometimes it might be better, and it breaks my heart to say it, but it might be better to have some private entity that has a professional history of running a network to do it. The problem is you find a good entity to buy it, you trust them, 3 years later, they're bought by someone else who's bought by someone else, and then you got Comcast in 7 years.
So the football coach for Minnesota makes $6 million a year.
No, he makes more than that. If you actually, so that's probably like his a certain thing, but then he's got bonuses. He's got a car. He's got all kinds of other allowances. I would guess that it's significantly more than that, all in. Kind of like the Comcast bill is more than they tell you.
Okay,
Okay, but Travis, hold on a second. This is crazy, and we live in a world in which that is not appropriate. But let's also be honest in that him being there results in the university getting many more than $6 million of contributions from wealthy alums and others who go to the football games and things like that. And so the system is crazy, but it is not crazy within that system to pay someone that amount of money.
He may be making the university $20 million a year, Travis. So that,
okay, but hold on.
He might be a good investment. Yeah.
But using Chris's line of logic, a well-run municipal network will bring millions and millions of dollars of tax revenue, increase business, put people to work, and you're going to pay a person $100,000 to do that, and you're going to pay a guy to throw a football $6 million?
No, so, and I'll go even further, Travis, because it's just working, whether I was in Gary, Indiana earlier this year, working with the tribes, it's one thing to talk about the things you just talked about, Travis, but what is the value of a child, right? Who knows? There was a person who she had said that a lot of these kids feel like society doesn't value them. And my response whenever I hear someone say that is to say, they are intelligent. They are correct. The reason that they feel that society does not value them is because society does not value them. And it's crazy, but yes. And so what happens is we don't put a dollar figure on that. And so you're like, oh my God, it's going to cost $2,500 to connect this home. And then another $30 a month to keep them connected. And you're like, well, that seems like a lot of money until you compare it to the cost of a child who grows up feeling like nobody cares about them, who doesn't have a good education, who then ends up creating all kinds of problems that result in far higher costs, and no one figures that into the calculation. Kim, you raise your hand.
So along with the $6 million that we were just talking about, do they get a pension plan with that since they are a government employee for their
They never stay long enough to get a pension.
We're not even, no one tell Travis how much they get when they decide to leave. When they had big losing seasons, not unlike the major Fortune 500 companies, when you're doing a terrible job, then they give you more money to leave than they were paying you to stick around.
Travis, there's a coach leaving at Texas who's getting $12 million to leave.
Okay, so what I've learned on this episode of Connect This is that NASA spends $23 billion a year, and I'm not even sure what they do. And second of all, that football coaches are the highest paid state employees in the state. Okay.
It's even worse than that. Most states have a cap on all salaries, usually not higher than either the governor or the head of the House of Representatives or something. So everyone else in the state, they usually have caps.
And we wonder why government isn't run well.
So if you're a really good IT guy,
ignoring us to Google things. I want to hear what he's found.
There's somebody named, what's this guy's name? Nick Sabin, I guess.
Oh, come on, man. Right? Are we getting punked?
And this guy, I guess he's the head football guy at Alabama.
He just retired, man.
He just retired.
$93.5 million.
Travis, he's a really good coach, legitimately.
Well, we need a really good coach to roll some fiber out in Alabama. To throw a football, $100 million.
No, he did not get $100 million. He did not make $100 million a year. Yeah. That's probably over his career. So, yeah.
His name is Nick Saban too, but we know if I know more about football than you do, Travis, we've got some problems in the world too.
Wow.
But I want to come back to how this is related, which is that it is frustrating for me when I'm working with these different groups in a way that we don't see elected officials taking seriously. Ways in which this just attacks, just is just related to our pocketbooks, right? Like the money that the four of us put into the federal government or into state and local governments, right? Like a lot of people in rural areas end up having higher healthcare coverage, in part because it is more difficult for them to access it. And so they have worse outcomes. And if we could improve upon that, the amount of money that we would save ourselves is greater. We would save more money by making sure they could access telehealth and other things. And then using that money to build a network, we would have money left over, is one of the things that we've found, is significantly so. The cost of building these networks is not as high as you think compared to other public infrastructure investments. Roads, electricity, bike trails, all manner of things that we put money in. Football coaches. We put tons of money into these things. The amount of money it costs to build a fiber optic network to every address in a home is often comparable to the amount that the local government or the state combined put into a football stadium or other public sports facilities. If you actually look into the numbers, you'll find that they may not exact, but they're the same order of magnitude. But we choose to support those things. And I love it. Like, I'm a big sports guy, more than Travis. But at the same time, it is frustrating when we don't see the value of those other things, of broadband to everyone. So like, I mean, if we can wrap up on this, but I mean, I'll just go back to Cleveland, right? If you took the ACP money that's coming into Cleveland, which by my calculations seems to be greater than $30 million per year, and you put that into a fiber optic network and perhaps wireless as well, depending on the neighborhoods, you're not going to cover the entire city, but you focus it on the neighborhoods where the ACP is the greatest of use. You end up generating a significant benefit in that you have people connected. We're not spending any extra money. We're spending the same money that would have been spent. But then you're also getting the economic development benefits of having a network that is serving businesses and other people who are not on ACP in those areas. And so you get what we call a multiplier effect in government. But that we don't have those conversations because Comcast and AT&T will say, we have massive lobbying power. And if you want to have a program that is going to benefit low income folks, you have to do it in the way we want or it won't happen. And to date, they've mostly been successful because we don't have an alternate source of power, right? All of the digital navigators out there, nobody votes based on what their digital navigator tells them. And so we haven't generated any political power to make sure that elected officials are able to ignore the cable and telephone companies without being vulnerable when it comes to who's writing them checks to run for their elections and that sort of a thing. It's a mess. Like someone could say it better than that, but that's the outline of the issue.
He did that without being ranty, Travis.
I tried my best. I brought the football thing in. I mean, I used all my tricks, and he didn't bite.
My post-flight migraine is starting to kick in, so I'm just curious if anyone has any last topics, but I think we're going to be exiting out here pretty soon.
I think we're good.
Well done, guys.
Well, this, I will just say thank you, Delta, for getting me in early. I got a nap in after I got home, so that was nice. But I love the energy in the chat. It was a fun conversation.
We had an active chat today. We had a good chat.
Yes, well done, folks. We'll be back in. I'm going to hope for about 2 weeks. That's what I'm aiming for.
Wait. There's a really good comment. No one is buying tickets to watch Travis troubleshoot a router.
That's just because they don't know. Yeah. If we get a little marketing budget from Kim
I might pay for that.
Well, I would just be there for the commentary of Travis when he does it more than anything.
Yeah, no, it's Juan, we actually had a little price. We announced our $5 rate increase. So, and I would like to at one point address. I sent you guys an email. How can you build a high quality network and provide affordable? Can they go hand in hand?
Yeah, that's right. I was trying to remember. I was looking through our chat or through our text to try to figure out. I knew there was something you sent, Travis.
It would be fun. It would be fun to explore that. Does high quality and low cost go hand in hand in our area, in our product?
And I think there's a way that it can. So we can talk about that next show. Yeah.
I think it would be worth talking about, and then also thinking about different business models because obviously it's different for UTOPIA to do it than Travis to do it than a larger company or one owned by private equity. And the other thing, Travis, I would say is that it also depends on what your growth plans are, because I think you could offer amazing plans, Travis, if you just stopped building, right? If you just said I'm done, then you would be able to do whatever you wanted.
Well, and that is the thing that I never understand about these financial models. So I'd love Doug to delve into it. We always talk about new money they get handed. Whatever happened to all their subscriber revenue? Where the heck's all that going? You think that there'd be ample there to build and maintain, but that's another rant for Mr. Mitchell when he's awake.
I have a two-word answer for you: stock buybacks.
Mm-hmm. Well, the shareholders will be happy. Mr. Mitchell's 401k will be happy then.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing the wisdom of the ETF. Versus the I take a little bit of money and I'm like, I think this company's going to do well, and then I put most of the money in properly, and I just look at how they grow, and my bets have not been great. Sorry.
Yeah, go Vanguard, right? Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to, like I said, be back in about 2 weeks. I hope. Hope that nothing major happens next week. I'll be out in California briefly, and then the following week will be a net inclusion. So we'll come back right after net inclusion and see what's going on.
Just in the next week, there's going to be 4 or 5 coaches hired making more than $5 million a year, Travis.
Woo! All right. We could have built some broadband networks. We could have taken Sabin's money and done all of Gary, Indiana. There you go.
My ears.
Yep.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's been a fun episode of Connect This.